it's really hard to have a conversation sometimes with people. It really is. I think a lot of people are less open-minded, less inclined to be open-minded. And I don't know, I think people don't want to talk to each other. I mean, don't get me wrong, most of that's primarily because of social media. I mean, I grew up in an era when people called each other on the phone and actually talked to each other and had, a lot of interpersonal communication that way. Now, it sucks, but my specific era and my specific age and generation really was the first that just like used text messaging and instant messaging as like the primary source of communication, and that's been ultimately very detrimental because we were also the last to actually like still communicated to each other and talk to each other and really effectively voiced their opinion in a lot of ways. Excuse me. And I wanted to talk about this, and I just wanted to talk about, that's probably the biggest problem, I think, with the world for the most part, is people that don't talk to each other. I mean, this goes broader into, like, social media in general, and a multitude of aspects in this multivariate analysis, but ultimately the biggest thing is people just don't talk to each other anymore, and they're not willing to talk to each other and hear different perspectives and points of view. And it's because of this we are gaslighted into villainizing each other, and people are taking advantage of this in media and social media. And now we have a whole bunch of different people that think people who are ideologically on the right are racist, homophobic, effectively just hillbilly people, even though Florida went straight red and Ohio went straight red, and and there's a lot of conservative-minded individuals in various blue states, and just an automatic perspective of, hey, you're racist, and people on the ideological left who are all communists or commies, and basically just these woke individuals who are all, homosexuals, transgender people, LGBTQ, which honestly is nonsensical, because then there shouldn't be any, there shouldn't be a B in LGBTQ, because B means bisexual, which means they're bisexual for the two specific genders, but that's another different topic for another different day that no one wants to talk about. I don't want to piss off anybody. But then again, I really don't care what they say, and do whatever you want to me. I don't care. Anyways, after that little, I'm terrible at jokes. We all villainize each other, is ultimately my perspective. It just is, and most people on the ideological left are inherently have a lot of like old school conservative values. They just want things to be more liberalized, and want to help people, and they want to help people through government means because they don't know any other way, because they're not informed, or they don't have a real fundamental understanding of history, because most people who understand history are kind of just like, oh, when you just let people be, things actually turn out okay, instead of, a lot of government intervention, because the more government intervention there is, then you get Nazis, and you get communists, and you get a whole bunch of different people, a whole bunch of different, what I'm saying? It's just, it's a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding, which is why I think, say what you will about Democrats, but they're smart. They're real smart to get a hold of the institutions, and ultimately to get a hold of effectively the media in a lot of different ways, because, ultimately, just in that perspective and point of view, once they took that side, they weren't going to be shit-talked or bad-mouthed. And, it was funny, because I was watching a Haunted House 2 the other day, and, I just remember thinking to myself, because they made a casual joke about, like, one of the Wayne brother was basically just like, oh, man, what, like, why don't they just have Republicans say, like, that they racist or say the N-word, just waiting for that to happen. And I'm just like, that's not 100% accurate. It's not wrong. Don't get me wrong. But, like, I see a lot of Democrats, especially white Democrats, who have actually said the N-word. And, it's a lack of fundamental understanding of people and human nature sometimes, or just a lack of thinking, I think, is really the perspective. I think a lot of people just don't want to take a step back and actually go through a process of, they want to be told what to do sometimes, and I think that's very scary. And then they get mad when you have people who are kind of just like, take a step back and be like, hey, is this right or wrong? And, it's actually wrong. And then they get mad when you challenge their perspective, point of view, their narrative. And it's kind of funny. You see a bunch of different people, and you talk to a bunch of different people who are actually genuinely open-minded. And they're very different people than the people who aren't very open-minded. And I think it's very fascinating in that dichotomy. But my point is, you can change these people's minds. You can actually, do it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. And I think what you need is patience, empathy, and sympathy, and really just a fundamental understanding of human nature and the human condition. But you can, if they're willing to even remotely talk to you, then you gotta shoot them back. If they say X, Y, and Z about this or that, like if they talk about the border, and it's like, the border's always bad, man. And then you just shoot back and be like, yeah, but, it's never been this bad. And it hasn't been this bad specifically, if you want to get into raw numbers and details, in about 20 years, since basically the end of the Clinton administration, beginning of the Bush administration. And, if you want to get to those numbers, yeah, so just saying, it's never been this bad. It hasn't, and you can say a positive thing about Obama's border stuff, which not a very good thing you can say, but you can say, hey, their numbers weren't as bad as this. This is specifically because of the current administration's perspective on the border, them advocating for them to come over but not giving them amnesty, and ultimately they're just not doing anything about it. Because if things are an issue and you're seeing 2 to 3 times the volume of people coming over, that's a problem regardless, and it should be given some attention to. But if it's not going to be given any attention to, then that's an issue. Just hit them back with that. And if just gotta be patient and just keep hitting them back with specific jabs and stuff. Russia's the biggest enemy, yada yada yada. But yeah, all our stuff is made in China and they don't like us. Well, I don't like the Orange Man. Have you actually seen a full video of the Orange Man? And you can just, if they're willing to, you can compare videos and just be like, this is what they tell you, and this is what they say and what they show. Well, Biden's a lot better. And then you can show him Biden just basically being like, I think, poor kids or black kids or, should I get the same opportunity as white kids, and, or just say that if you don't, just show them the video of just him basically saying a bunch of real racist stuff. And just him effectively being like, or just tell them the truth. Yeah, he actually did have a friend who was a part of the KKK. So, says what you will about say what you will about that. Just little things like that ultimately is, and you break down the walls, you break down the barriers, for instance, and it's gonna take a lot of time. It won't happen overnight, but as long as you are willing to entertain some of their thoughts and their perspectives, which are not all bad, don't get me wrong. Not that commie stuff, don't get me wrong, or anything even remotely close to socialist perspective. No, I'm not about that. And then you can really challenge them about their ideals and ultimately tell them the real history, the real problems. You think Stalin's bad, just hear some of the stuff that Pol Pot did in Vietnam, and your perspective will completely change. Then their perspective might actually change about the Vietnam War. At least certain perspectives. I'm not pro Vietnam, but there's 2 sides to every story, and you have to understand both sides. See, little things like that. And give a balanced perspective, point of view, even though your perspective objectively is probably more correct, more right, and ultimately might be the way to go. If I could just say one thing, you gotta be patient with people. You gotta be able to communicate with people, because if you actually do want things better, then you really need to communicate with people. If you want to win, that's fine too. But, things aren't actually going to get better. People need to be patient. People need to communicate and talk to each other. And until we do, things are going to be the way they are for a very long time. And people will always make the argument, well, we never really talked to each other. We really never really did anything. But, and I would always make the point, and I'm always going to make this point, is people weren't like they were before. This is a very different age. People had a lot of these similar values, even 20 to 25 years ago. Now they don't anymore. And until we talk to these people, it's never going to get any better. Those are my thoughts.